Gene Watson finally exposed what happened behind the Opry curtains after spending nearly half a century standing just outside country music's most guarded door. He sang on that sacred wooden circle, delivered the kind of songs that built the genre, and walked away night after night without the honor that usually follows a voice like his. For most artists, the Grand Ole Opry call comes early, when momentum is high and careers are still rising. For Gene Watson, it came after decades of silence. Born in Palestine, Texas, and shaped by long roads and honest songs, Watson never chased trends or softened his sound. While country music shifted toward polish and popularity, he stayed rooted in restraint, heartbreak, and truth. Legends praised his voice, audiences stood in admiration, yet the institution he loved kept its distance. At 82, Gene Watson finally spoke about the waiting and the silence. The question is, was the delay simply forgotten timing, or was there something deeper happening behind the Opry curtains that kept the door closed for so long? Before Nashville ever learned his name, Gene Watson's voice was already fully formed, shaped far from bright lights and recording studios. He was born in Palestine, Texas, a small town where music lived quietly alongside hard work, and where talent was not something you announced but something you carried. His early years were not defined by ambition or industry dreams, but by routine, responsibility, and sound. The sound of engines, tools, and metal filled his days, because before music paid the bills, Gene Watson worked in an auto body shop, earning his living with his hands. That environment mattered. It taught patience. It taught humility. It taught him how to stay present in the work without expecting applause. When he sang, it was not an escape from labor, it was an extension of it. His voice carried the weight of long hours and honest effort, and people noticed long before Nashville did. In the early 1960s, Watson began performing professionally across Texas, singing in honky-tonks and small venues, where audiences did not care about image or reputation. They cared about whether a song felt true. Those rooms were not forgiving. Crowds talked loudly, drank freely, and tested every performer who stepped onto the stage. A singer had to earn silence one note at a time. Watson did not command attention with volume or flash. He earned it with tone, control, and restraint. His voice did not push, it settled, it stayed. By the end of a song, people leaned in, not because they were told to listen, but because something in his delivery asked them to. While others chased exposure, Watson focused on consistency. He began releasing early recordings before Nashville recognition arrived, not as calculated moves, but as natural extensions of the work he was already doing. These records carried the same qualities his live performances did: clarity, emotional discipline, and a deep respect for traditional country storytelling. There was no attempt to modernize the sound or smooth out its edges. The voice came first, and the voice stayed honest. That honesty became his signature. In an era when many artists adjusted their delivery to fit changing expectations, Watson did not. He sang the same way in small Texas bars as he did in front of larger crowds, letting the song carry the meaning instead of shaping himself around it. That choice earned loyalty from listeners who recognized something rare in his phrasing. His voice did not perform emotion, it revealed it. Nashville eventually took notice, because voices like that always demand attention, even when institutions hesitate. Yet, recognition did not arrive with immediate belonging. The respect was there. The invitations followed. The doors opened just enough to let him step inside, then quietly closed again. Watson continued to perform, continued to record, continued to show up exactly as he was. There was no public frustration, no demand for acknowledgement, no attempt to rewrite himself into something more convenient. This is where the tension began to form. His loyalty to traditional country music, the very quality that defined his voice, would later require patience few artists are willing to endure. The sound that made him unmistakable also placed him slightly out of step with an industry that increasingly rewarded adaptation over endurance. Still, he did not adjust. He stayed rooted where he started. The voice was undeniable. The respect was earned. The work was done. And yet, the most important door remained closed. By the time the 1970s arrived, country music was no longer standing still. Nashville was changing its posture, polishing its edges, and adjusting its sound to reach a wider audience. What had once been driven by storytelling and restraint began leaning toward crossover appeal, smoother production, and radio-friendly formulas. This shift did not happen overnight, but its impact was unmistakable. For artists willing to adapt, opportunity expanded. For those who stayed rooted, the ground quietly shifted beneath them. Gene Watson entered this era with a voice that refused to bend. His breakthrough came in 1975 with Love in the Hot Afternoon, a song that carried warmth, control, and emotional clarity at a time when country music was beginning to chase shine. The record did not follow trends. It followed feeling. Its success proved something important. There was still an audience for traditional country when it was delivered with honesty and discipline. Watson was no longer invisible. Radio played the song. Listeners responded. The industry took notice. More success followed. Paper Rosie and Farewell Party cemented his place as a singer who could turn restraint into impact. These were not novelty hits or manufactured moments. They were songs built on emotional patience, phrasing, and trust in the listener. Across decades, Watson would earn multiple top 10 hits, each reinforcing the same truth. He did not need to reinvent himself to remain relevant. His voice carried its own authority. Yet while the charts reflected his consistency, the industry's priorities continued to evolve. Nashville rewarded artists who mirrored the moment. Production became smoother. Image grew louder. Country music leaned closer to pop, and the artists who thrived were often the ones who adapted quickly. Watson did not resist this shift publicly. He simply did not participate in it. His sound remained traditional, his delivery unchanged, his commitment to storytelling intact. That choice carried a cost. Institutional recognition in Nashville has always followed timing as much as talent. Watson's success proved his merit, but merit alone did not guarantee momentum within the system. While newer voices rose by matching the industry's direction, his work moved parallel to it, respected but not prioritized. He continued recording. He continued touring. He continued delivering performances that reminded listeners what country music had once been built upon. What made this period especially defining was the absence of compromise. Watson could have softened his phrasing, altered his production, or leaned into the evolving sound. He chose not to. His songs remained rooted in heartbreak, reflection, and quiet strength. This consistency earned him something deeper than trend-based fame. It earned trust. Fans knew what they would hear when Gene Watson sang, and they came back because of it. However, institutions move differently than audiences. The industry responds to shifts, cycles, and visibility. Recognition often follows momentum rather than longevity. Watson's steady presence did not create headlines. It created endurance. Over time, that distinction became clearer. He was not missing from country music. Country music was slowly moving away from him. Still, the work never stopped. The hits kept coming. The respect remained strong. Watson continued to stand as proof that traditional country could survive in changing times. His voice aged, but it did not fade. The sound stayed intact. The audience stayed loyal. What changed was the distance between artistic merit and institutional acknowledgement. This was not rejection. It was misalignment. The timing did not favor restraint. It favored adaptation. Watson chose loyalty instead. That loyalty preserved his voice, his catalog, and his credibility. It also placed him just outside the center of an industry chasing something newer. By the time Gene Watson began appearing regularly on the Grand Ole Opry stage, his presence there no longer felt unusual. He knew the walk. He knew the lights. He knew the weight of the wooden circle beneath his boots. Decade after decade, he returned as a guest, invited to sing, invited to honor the tradition, invited to stand where country music keeps its memory alive. Each appearance affirmed something important. The Opry recognized his voice. What it did not offer was belonging. Being invited is not the same as being chosen. Watson experienced that distinction repeatedly. He performed on the Opry stage across decades, delivering the same disciplined performances that had earned him respect everywhere else. Audiences responded with warmth. Fellow musicians watched closely. The institution continued to extend invitations. Yet the title never came. The difference between guest and member remained quietly intact. During these years, Watson watched peers and contemporaries step into membership. Some arrived earlier in their careers. Others entered later, carried forward by momentum or visibility. Each induction reaffirmed the Opry's power to define belonging. Watson stood nearby, applauding, supporting, and continuing his work without public complaint. He never questioned the process aloud. He never challenged the silence. His response was consistency. That restraint shaped how others spoke about him. Within the tight circle of musicians, Watson earned a reputation few receive. He became known as the singer's singer, a title not given lightly. It reflected something deeper than chart positions or awards. It meant his voice set a standard. Other vocalists listened to him differently. They recognized the control, the phrasing, the emotional discipline that could not be taught. That respect lived backstage, in conversations, in quiet acknowledgement. Still, the institutional silence remained. Watson continued to stand in the same wooden circle where legends had stood before him. Each performance carried history. Each exit carried the same unanswered question. The absence of recognition did not diminish his delivery. If anything, it sharpened it. His voice held steady. His phrasing remained exact. The songs did their work without embellishment. The emotional weight of this period did not come from confrontation. It came from repetition, returning, singing, leaving, watching the door remain closed. Over time, the waiting itself became part of the story, not a public narrative, but a personal one. Faith was no longer about hope for an outcome. It became about endurance without assurance. What makes this stretch of his career so revealing is how little changed on the surface. Watson continued touring. He continued recording. He continued honoring the genre he loved. The Opry continued inviting him. The relationship remained respectful, professional, and unresolved. There was no moment of explanation, no declaration, just time passing. Standing in that circle without the title carried a quiet ache. Not because the honor defined his worth, but because it represented belonging to a tradition he had upheld for a lifetime. Each appearance reinforced his connection to the Opry's history. Each departure reinforced the distance between recognition and inclusion. The waiting stretched on, not measured in years but in performances. Each song added another layer of patience. Each applause ended the same way, with gratitude, dignity, and silence from the institution that held the final word. The invitation moment did not arrive. Not yet. The delay continued to shape him in ways no ceremony could. His faith did not falter publicly. His voice did not change. His presence remained constant, but silence has weight. By the time January 17, 2020 arrived, Gene Watson approached the Grand Ole Opry like he always had. There was no ceremony in his preparation, no expectation carried into the building. He came to sing. Decades of experience had taught him that the work mattered more than the outcome, and that night was no different. The invitation on the schedule was familiar. The routine was unchanged. The weight of waiting had become part of the rhythm. Watson stepped onto the Opry stage unaware that anything had shifted behind the curtain. The wooden circle felt the same beneath his feet. The lights fell into their usual places. His voice filled the room with the same calm authority that had carried him through a lifetime of performances. Nothing in his delivery suggested anticipation. Nothing in his presence hinted at surprise. He sang as he always did, steady, disciplined, and rooted in truth. The audience responded the way they always had, with attention first, then applause. For them, this was another moment, with a voice they trusted. What they did not know was that history was waiting just beyond the final note. When the song ended and the applause rose, something changed in the air. The moment stretched. The silence after the clapping held longer than usual. Then Vince Gill walked onto the stage. Gill's presence shifted the room instantly. He was not there to sing. He was there to speak. As he approached, Watson turned, confusion visible on his face. The years of waiting had trained him not to assume anything. He listened, standing still. As the words unfolded, the invitation came not with spectacle, but with clarity. Vince Gill extended the offer for Gene Watson to become a member of the Grand Ole Opry. The reaction did not come in grand gestures. It came in stillness. Watson's expression changed first. The discipline that had shaped his career gave way to emotion he did not rush to contain. His face reflected decades of restraint, loosening all at once. The crowd responded immediately. Applause turned to celebration. The room understood the weight of what was happening. This moment mattered because it arrived without demand. Watson had not campaigned for recognition. He had not framed his patience as protest. He had simply remained present. The invitation honored that presence. It acknowledged a career built on consistency rather than confrontation. The official induction followed on February 7, 2020. That night placed him permanently within the institution he had served for decades. The ceremony marked the end of waiting, but it also reframed the years that came before it. The delay no longer read as absence, it read as endurance. What unfolded on that stage revealed something larger than one man's recognition. It revealed the value of patience in a world that often rewards urgency. Watson's legacy was not defined by the length of time it took to receive the honor, but by how he carried himself during the wait. The applause that night did not celebrate a victory over the Opry. It celebrated a reunion. Patience, rather than protest, shaped the path he walked. The moment was never about anger or vindication. It unfolded with grace, arriving not because of pressure, but because time had finally allowed truth to be seen clearly. As Watson accepted the invitation, the years of silence folded into something meaningful. The waiting transformed from burden to testimony. The crowd understood it. The artists understood it. The circle opened not because it was forced, but because it was ready. By the time Gene Watson began speaking about the Grand Ole Opry from the perspective of 82 years lived, his words carried no trace of unfinished business. The waiting was no longer something to explain or justify. It had become part of the shape of his life, settled into memory without sharp edges. When he reflected on the years before his induction, he did not frame them as rejection. He framed them as timing. Watson's language stayed consistent with the way he had always carried himself. Gratitude came first. He spoke openly about appreciation for the music, the audiences, and the people who had stood beside him along the way. There was no effort to rewrite history or assign fault. The delay was not something he corrected, it was something he accepted. That acceptance revealed more than any explanation ever could. Even after becoming an official member of the Opry, Watson did not slow down. He continued touring and performing into his 80s, carrying the same discipline into every appearance. The stage did not become smaller. The work did not become lighter. He approached each performance with the same intention he had carried from the beginning. Sing the song, tell the truth, let the rest take care of itself. The Opry membership solidified what listeners and musicians already knew. His legacy did not need validation, but the recognition gave it a home. It placed his name permanently within the lineage he had honored for decades. That permanence mattered, not because it elevated his work, but because it preserved it within the institution that defined the genre's memory. What stood out most in his reflections was the absence of resentment. Watson never spoke as though something had been taken from him. He spoke as though something had been entrusted to him. Time, he suggested through his tone, had allowed him to arrive without bitterness. By the time the honor came, pride no longer needed to be satisfied. The moment belonged to gratitude instead. As country music continued to evolve, the industry began looking backward, with new clarity. The qualities once viewed as old-fashioned regained meaning. Traditional storytelling, restraint and emotional honesty found renewed appreciation. In that shift, Watson's career appeared not as something delayed, but as something preserved. The industry had finally caught up with the truth his voice had carried all along. His continued presence on stage reinforced that truth. Audiences did not come to hear nostalgia. They came to hear sincerity. Watson's voice remained steady, his phrasing intact, his connection undiluted. Age did not soften his delivery, it deepened it. Each performance added another layer of lived experience to songs that had always relied on it. When Watson spoke about the Opry later in life, he did so without elaboration. He did not analyze the weight or assign meaning to the silence. He spoke simply, acknowledging the honor and moving forward. That restraint mirrored his music. Not everything needs explanation to be understood. The years of waiting, the decades of appearing without belonging, the long stretch of silence, all settled into something complete. The journey no longer pointed toward what was missing, it pointed toward what endured. Gene Watson did not expose bitterness when he finally spoke. He exposed patience, dignity, and faith shaped by time rather than reward. The years of waiting did not harden him. They refined him. Every mile traveled, every stage walked, every song sung without assurance, built something quieter and stronger than recognition. His story was never about being denied. It was about enduring without needing to be explained. The Grand Ole Opry did not create Gene Watson's legacy. It confirmed it. His voice had already carried the weight of country music's truest values long before the institution opened its door. By the time that door finally moved, the honor arrived not as validation, but as acknowledgement of a lifetime lived in alignment with the music itself. Watson's journey stands as a reminder that success does not always arrive on schedule. Sometimes it arrives when it can finally be received without pride standing in the way. His patience became his testimony, his faith became his foundation, and his voice, steady and unchanged, remains proof that staying true can still lead home. For more emotional stories, check out this video.